What's the most painful thing you've been told? I'll definitely be waiting in the comments for your stories. What was the most painful thing you've been told? Enjoy watching. Story 1. All of the things people have said since my dad died, whether it was meant to be hurtful or not. You're using his death for attention, or asking, is that what he would have wanted, whenever I make my own decisions for myself? One friend telling me in front of a room full of people that I really need to get a job, even though I didn't need to since the inheritance made me more financially secure. Story 2. There are so many hurtful things my mom has said to me, but when she found out I was cutting myself at 10 years old, her first reaction was, if you're going to do that stupid shit, you might as well go through with it. I obviously haven't forgotten it for a day the past 12 years. Of course, if confronted with this now, she wouldn't remember saying it, or it simply never happened. Story 3. My mom and I were talking about how smart we think my daughter is, and she says to me, maybe she'll be a doctor like you could have been. She's definitely going to college, though, like you should have. It's my biggest disappointment in life that you didn't finish college. Like, thanks, Mom. No mention that when I graduated high school, I begged for a year off because I was so burnt out, or that I was self-harming and had suicidal thoughts almost daily at that time in my life. No mention that I tried to go back to school and found out the help her husband gave me financially didn't exist, and I owed that tuition before I could even get transcripts. We've got a better relationship now, but I will never forget that comment, and how much it hurts to know for a fact that my mom's biggest disappointment in life is me. Story 4. I had a friend in college who I hadn't heard from in a few years. I found out recently that the reason she ghosted me, and most of the other people she knew, was that she had inoperable brain cancer, and she didn't want to be a burden to anyone. She spent the last 2 years of her life in pain, and mostly alone, because she was worried about everyone else. She wrote us all letters telling us that she loved us and missed us and had them sent out after she passed. I wish like hell I could have had the chance to be there for her. Story 5. Just wish the cops would stop getting involved. My brother moved to my dad's house, parents divorced over domestic abuse, and turns out he got physically abused there too, so he ran away from home and stayed at friends' houses and such. My dad called me and I said I do not want to see him because of what is happening, and that's what he said. Absolutely disgusting, vile person. When my brothers, both of them lived there at the time, tried to move back here the first time, he cut their cell service and bank accounts, and when they eventually came back because of gas and navigation, he said, wanted to make sure you didn't get far. My mom said this is the type of thing he used to do to her. Story 6. Took some edibles with my dad one time, and we were watching a movie. The credits started to play. He looked over at me and told me, I feel bad for you. I was confused and tried asking him what he meant. He just kept saying in a hateful tone that he felt bad for me, and how my life sucked, and that he couldn't imagine living the lame life I live now. For context, the day of my high school graduation, I started showing symptoms of the disease that would require me to be hospitalized a week later, that resulted in a craniotomy to biopsy a lesion on my brain to see if it was cancer. It wasn't, but I was in and out of the hospital for 7 months before it stabilized, and had to drop out of college during it. I'm not sure I've really emotionally recovered from hearing him say that. I also put a stop to buying him any more edibles that I was giving him for his chronic pain. Story 7. You're just like your father. My parents divorced when I was 2, and my only memory of him was a couple years later when he was in town for a court date for failing to pay child support. Spoiler alert, he never paid anything and moved cross-country. It didn't help that I was visually a carbon copy of my father, and my mom eventually stopped saying things like that, but at the time it really fucked me up. Story 8. I was living with my dad in high school. I got a job at a local restaurant, lost my job because I made a pretty big mistake. I was 15 at the time, and when I told my dad what happened, he said, "You're not and his surname, you're a mom's maiden name." Another one for the list was telling me I should be disowned for wanting to make my daughter's middle name the same as my late grandmother's middle name, my mom's mom. I'm now divorced, and if I decide to change my name away from my married name, I'm going to change it to my mom's maiden name. I don't want his name anymore. Story 9. My dad told me that I let people take advantage of me, and it doesn't make me a good person. It just makes me stupid, and that no one cared about anything I have to say. In his defense, he was definitely hurt, because I'd lied to him about failing a class. I was an adult, not a child, and my mom had known about it for weeks. I mean, I didn't tell him because I was afraid of him and still am in my 30s, but it was pretty messed up of me. I still second and third guess every interaction I have with anyone because of him. Story 10. She just went. Mom was hospitalized at 65 because she suddenly lost her appetite and was unwell. The doctors couldn't find anything wrong with her despite her being there for a month. She declined, and after watching her horribly deteriorate, she went into a deep sleep. Doctors said she wasn't actively dying and were still hopeful. I stayed by her side day and night, and the one time my aunt came and told me to go home and rest, my mum died. The one time I wasn't by her side, 2 years ago, and it still kills me every day. Story 11. I was out looking at drums a few weeks back, and I got a text from my girlfriend saying I don't love you, and at first I dismissed it as a reference to the song by My Chemical Romance with the same name because she's a huge MCR fan. But I responded and asked Wodim, and she explains that she didn't love me anymore. Fast forward about 5 minutes of this setting into my brain, and I'm sitting at a drum set crying. And then, after going through about a week of just the worst heartbreak ever, I get a text from her explaining how everything said in those messages was actually done by her friends and how she felt horrible. So fast forward about 2 minutes after getting that from her, I ask her if she would to try again. She says yes. So yeah, the end of the story is happy, but the heartbeat absolutely sucked. It couldn't eat for a week. I couldn't sleep almost at all. I literally sat and cried for a week straight until we got back together. Story 12. He passed. He's dead. My sister's video call to let me know on the night of August 7th, 2020, that my gentle, strong, 85-year-old dad had died of aspiration pneumonia, a complication of Parkinson's disease that he had had for 12 years. My sister and mom were going to see him in the hospital the next day. Otherwise, in the country he and my mom still lived in at the time, and I still had a shred of hope that he would make it. When she responded to my text message with calling you, I got that sinking feeling and my heart beat faster. Story 13. When I was 12, I told my mom about the abuse I experienced from my biological father when I was a young child. She asked if I was sure he was the one who abused me, and not my ex-stepdad. It's a huge slap in the face to hear your mom essentially say, "Yeah, I know I left you alone around abusers growing up, but I still don't believe you." Another instance was my mom telling me I deserved to be catcalled for dressing like a slut, bike shorts and a tank top in 95-degree weather. Whorish, I know. What she didn't know was that I had recently been sexually assaulted by my boyfriend at the time and was bringing up getting catcalled that day to test the waters and see if she was a safe person to ask for help. I'm low contact at this point. The only thing keeping me from going no contact is my siblings, who she is brainwashing with unschooling. They are all functionally illiterate and a hyper-controlling religion. I want to be there to support my siblings when they can finally escape, and if that means staying, I can deal. Story 14. After receiving a compliment that I had beautiful soft skin, my mom told 8-year-old me, when people say things like that, or that you have nice hair, it's because they can't tell you that you're beautiful. So instead of just saying that you are ugly, they feel like they have to say something nice, so they find something small, like your skin, to compliment you on. You shouldn't believe them. Oh, and then a few years later, she told me that she loved our dad more than my brother and I, because she chose him. She didn't get to pick us, she just made us. A few more years go by and they divorce. She then keeps telling us how she can't wait for us to grow up so she can move on with her life. Story 15. In my mid-20s, I finally told my mother my older brother has molested me as a kid. Her response was, "I had always wondered." Fast forward a few months when I have processed that response and tell her how I feel about her always wondering, but not doing anything to address it. She screams, "Well, you would initiate it too, so you obviously wanted it." I was 9 years old at the time this occurred with my older brother. In that moment, I swear to God, she was non-human, like eyes black, surrounded by a vortex of black fog energy. It's hard to find words for it, but truly, I have never seen anyone transform into whatever I saw her as in that moment. Story 16. My mom raised me well and took great care of me, but never allowed us to have the close relationship I wanted. As a kid, she always told me she was my mom and not my friend, and when I'm grown, it'll be different. That makes sense, but I'm 23 now, and my mom still treats me like I'm a child even though I don't live with her. She doesn't allow me to stand up for myself or disagree with her opinions because she's my mom. Last time I visited, she mentioned a 26-year-old at the hospital she works at. That's one of her new best friends. I asked why we can't have a friendly relationship like that, and she said, "We can never be friends because I'm your mom, and that's how it will always be." It's sad being an adult and realizing certain things. For my last birthday, all I wanted to do was hang out with her, and she did. It was actually a really great day, but it went back to normal passive aggressiveness with her after. My mom loves me to death, but she has never liked me, and I've always known that, but just now realized it's true. Story 17. A few weeks before my wedding, I had a falling out with a bridesmaid because I caught her in a couple of big lies. So I told her that I didn't want her in my wedding and I was no longer going to be in hers. She started telling lies about me to her friends, saying I attacked her for her character and told her she was a bad person. which I had the text to prove that is not what I said. A friend of hers whom I barely knew took it upon herself to text me that I was unfit to be a wife and anybody mother. I had a soon-to-be 12-year-old stepdaughter, and I was 8 weeks pregnant. A few weeks later, my stepdaughter, while in the care of her bio-mom, was killed in an accident. And 3 weeks later, I miscarried my son. Every night I thought about those worse, that I was unfit to be a wife or mother. I really started to believe it, and felt like that's why I lost not one but 2 children. It took a full year of weekly therapy to work through that one untrue statement. Story 18. Right after my mother died of metastatic breast cancer, like literally that night, my father sat my brother and me down to discuss what we were going to do moving forward. Our options were, stay in our current house for as long as possible. My father could only just barely support us all there with some serious penny pinching. Or, 2, move in with my grandmother, but only under the condition that we gave up our 2 dogs. My father's heartbreak was visible as he said this to us. I was 17 at the time. My brother was 15. We had an 8-year-old brother who was left out of the discussion. If anything went wrong, we would be forced to move in with my grandmother anyway. The major concerns were the dryer, which was audibly going out, my dad's car, which was over 10 years old, and if the landlords raised the rent, since we were currently getting a rate far below what the house was actually worth. My grandmother had the space for us but wouldn't let us move in with our dogs because she didn't have the energy to clean up after a pet anymore. This wasn't about poor housebreaking, but about the usual hair and smell that comes with owning a dog. It didn't matter that 3 adolescents were moving in and could help with the cleaning. We ended up choosing to move in with her to try and maximize the time we had to rehome our dogs, instead of risking needing to move on short notice because of one of the reasons listed above. We'd had one of those dogs since I was in elementary school. The other was my mother's present for beating cancer the first time, 7 years prior to being re-diagnosed. She had always wanted a boxer or a pit bull, but Dad wouldn't let her get one because they're aggressive. He finally caved and let her get a mutt listed as having boxer lineage when it came time to celebrate. And now they're gone because my grandmother couldn't understand delegation and division of labor. Story 19. I was just thinking about this incident. I've been estranged from my children for a long time. My daughter finally responded to my call after 10 years of ghosting. She invited me to her house to meet my grandchildren. When I walked in the door, the 9-year-old, whom I had never met before, said to me, "Who are you?" It was like a dagger to my heart. Not only did my daughter not talk to me, she had never told her child that I existed. Very painful, even now that she has ghosted me again. I'm not sure what to do now. Story 20. Go away, we don't want you with us. My friend, who I thought she was my best friend, said that to me at school at break. Her and I were walking to eat, so we met our friend. So my best friend said to her, "Come eat with us." She said, of course, when we wanted to sit and eat. My best friend said, "Go away, we don't want you with us." My heart shocked when she said that it seems she really mean it. And I went to the bathroom crying. Then we go back to the class. I didn't talk to her. She said, "What's going on?" I said, "Are you kidding me?" She said, "Ooh, I was kidding with you." Really? By the way, it wasn't the first time she said that to me. Story 21. My ex left me and told me she wanted me to kill myself, then proceeded to try get me to kill myself for the next year. Because in their own words, because they thought it was funny, they knew I suffered from suicidal depression and would always put me down anytime I tried talk about it. Like they just up and decided to do that one day. We didn't have a fight or anything. They just woke up one day, decided say they're leaving me and want me to call myself. And instead of leaving it at that, they spent next year harassing me, trying to get me to... Close second is when problem only 5 or 6 years some of my mom's side of family told me they hated me because I was my father's son, which I hate my father too because he abused me half my life. Story 22. Oh, now... I'm trying to think of what was the most painful at the time. Definitely being notified of impending deaths. I remember throwing up when my cat was too sick and had to be put down. I had a friggin' breakdown when my dad came to tell me he was terminal. But afterwards, I wouldn't have shown him that. But I did also think of when my ex told me, "You'll find someone to love you for you one day. But it isn't me. You would be a horrible wife and a terrible mother." He also told me that my shoes in the hallway were something only rare men would deal with, and maybe I should try women. He knew I was closeted. He knew how I felt about him. And admittedly, I fucked up. I was not stable at the time because of everything he was saying. I lost my mind a little for a while. Had a shopping addiction when he left for some reason. Did a lot of random drugs to try it out in the safety of my bedroom, but still, drugs I didn't really want. It started a spiral for about 6 years, if I'm honest. So yes, while the death notifications fucked me up, I could think my way through it. Everyone experiences death, whether it's untimely or not. I could at least say, well, I'm not alone in this. But that statement caused a massive downward spiral for me, and I guess that extended amount of time makes it stand out more. He also told me once, "You're too fat to fuck," when I'd put on 10 lbs over 2 years, recovering from anorexia. He left for 3 days, and I let him come back. I was only 110 lbs. Now I look back at 21-year-old me and think, Christ, you should have run then. Story 23. I was always high-pressured to be the perfect kid for my parents, which lead to me have a full mental breakdown in my first year of college and having to drop out. My mom had a law school reunion, and she was disappointed that she didn't have a kid to brag to her classmates. Everyone had something good to say about their kids, and I had nothing. It just reconfirmed my feelings of always having to be perfect, while my crazy older sister, even though she got in trouble more often, she could pretty much do whatever she wanted. Meanwhile, I was the kid my parents could point to and say, see, we at least have one good kid. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked the video, like it. Be sure to write comments and share your stories.